What if I told you that the greatest crime of the 20th century wasn't committed with guns or bombs, but with a light bulb? 1924. Geneva, Switzerland. Winter. Snow falling outside the windows of a conference room where men in expensive suits are gathered around a polished table. They represent the biggest names in electric lighting: Philips from the Netherlands, Osram from Germany, General Electric from America. They're not here to compete, they're here to collude, to form what they'll call the Phoebus Cartel, and their mission is so audacious, so nakedly corrupt, that even a century later it feels like fiction. They're going to make light bulbs worse, on purpose. At the time, electric bulbs are lasting 2,500 hours or more. Some are pushing 3,000. The technology is improving. Filaments are getting more durable. The product is approaching something dangerous: perfection. And perfection is the enemy of profit, because if you sell someone a light bulb that lasts 10 years, you've just killed 90% of your future sales. So these men, these architects of manufactured failure, agreed to engineer their bulbs down to 1,000 hours. They create a committee to test products and fine any company whose bulbs last too long. You read that correctly. They punish quality. They weaponize failure. They take a product that works beautifully and cripple it in the name of profit. And it works. Within a few years, light bulbs across the world are burning out on schedule. Consumers don't know they're being cheated because they have nothing to compare against. The cartel controls the market, and a template is born, a blueprint for every industry that will follow. The question stops being, how do we make the best product? The question becomes, how do we make people buy the most products? This is the origin story of the Upgrade Treadmill. The moment capitalism looked at human satisfaction and decided it was a bug, not a feature. The moment someone realized that contentment could be engineered away, that desire could be manufactured, that you could take a person who had everything they needed and convince them they were desperately lacking. And the beautiful cruelty of it is that the victim never realizes they've been robbed because they keep volunteering to hand over the money. Let me show you how deep this goes. Livermore, California. Fire station number 6. Hanging from the ceiling is a light bulb that's been burning since 1899. 127 years. Same filament, same gentle glow. Firefighters have been born, lived entire careers, retired, and died, while this bulb just keeps burning. The building has been renovated around it. The world has changed. 2 world wars, the internet, smartphones, and this bulb, made before anyone in that Geneva conference room was born, just keeps working. They call it the Centennial Light, and it's an accusation. Physical evidence of what was stolen from us. Because if a bulb from 1899 can last over a century, then every bulb you've screwed into a socket in your lifetime that burned out after a year was designed to fail. Not poorly designed. Designed to fail. There's a difference. One is incompetence. The other is malice. But the Phoebus Cartel was just the beginning. They proved something that would reshape the entire architecture of modern commerce. Planned obsolescence works. Customers will blame themselves. They'll assume failure is natural. They'll buy the replacement without questioning why replacement is necessary. And if you can standardize that failure, if you can make it predictable, you can build an entire economic model on top of it. The cartel dissolved during World War II when supply chains broke and member companies ended up on opposite sides of the conflict. But the idea didn't die. It metastasized. It infected every industry. And by the time the war ended, planned obsolescence wasn't a conspiracy. It was business strategy. It was taught in universities, published in journals, celebrated as innovation. Enter Brooks Stevens. 1954. an industrial designer from Milwaukee with slicked back hair and a salesman's charm. He stands in front of a room full of advertising executives in Minneapolis and delivers a presentation that will become gospel. The title, Planned Obsolescence. But Stevens isn't talking about light bulbs burning out or products breaking down. He's talking about something far more sophisticated. Psychological obsolescence. Making products that still function feel inadequate. Making last year's model a source of shame. He describes it like poetry, like he's revealing a beautiful secret instead of explaining a psychological attack. Instilling in the buyer, he says, the desire to own something a little newer, a little better, a little sooner than is necessary. That last phrase is the knife. A little sooner than is necessary. He's not describing market demand. He's describing manufactured desire. He's explaining how to reach into someone's mind and adjust their sense of need, how to make someone who has enough feel like they're lacking. And the audience eats it up, because Stevens is giving them permission to stop trying to make better products, permission to focus instead on making people feel worse about the products they already own. It's cheaper, it's more profitable, and it's sustainable. Because while physical objects eventually reach the limits of improvement, psychological inadequacy has no ceiling. You can always make someone feel like they need more. The automobile industry is listening. General Motors has already stumbled onto this formula by accident. In the 1920s, they were being crushed by Ford. The Model T was cheap, reliable, and unchanging. Henry Ford's philosophy was utilitarian perfection. He wanted to build one perfect car and sell it to everyone forever. Any color you want, as long as it's black. GM couldn't compete on price or reliability, so they competed on something else, something intangible, style. They started releasing new models every single year. New colors, new chrome, new shapes. Not because the engineering improved, because the appearance changed, and appearance created a social hierarchy. If you drove a 3-year-old car, everyone could tell. Your car looked dated. It announced to the world that you were behind, that you couldn't keep up, that you were, in some fundamental way, less than. And that feeling, that manufactured inadequacy, was worth billions. By the 1950s, this isn't a strategy. It's an arms race. GM's design chief, Harley Earl, is adding tail fins to sedans, starting small, modest curves, but every year they grow. By 1957, Cadillacs have fins so absurd, so cartoonishly large, that they look like chrome sharks. The fins serve no function. They're not aerodynamic. They're symbolic. They're a middle finger to last year's model, and if you're driving a 1955 Cadillac with its modest little fins, you're not driving a bad car. You're driving an embarrassment. The genius isn't the fins. The genius is the rhythm, the predictable annual cycle. Train people to expect change and they'll start to crave it. Make change scheduled and they'll start measuring their lives by it. Pretty soon you don't need to convince people to upgrade. The calendar does it for you. September comes around and people start getting restless. Something new is coming. Something better. And what they have, the thing that was exciting 12 months ago, suddenly feels like a relic. But we need to go deeper. We need to talk about the man who understood why this works. Edward Bernays, Sigmund Freud's nephew. He took his uncle's theories about unconscious desire, about the hidden drives that motivate human behavior, and he weaponized them, turned them into tools for corporate manipulation. Bernays is the reason you think diamonds mean love, the reason bacon and eggs became breakfast, the reason women started smoking in public in the 1920s. That last one is instructive. American Tobacco Company hired Bernays in 1929 because women smoking in public was considered vulgar, taboo. The company was losing half the potential market. So Bernays staged an event, hired young women to march in the New York City Easter Parade smoking cigarettes. he tipped off the press, told them these were torches of freedom, framed smoking as feminist rebellion, as liberation, as a political act against patriarchal oppression. It worked. Sales to women exploded, but here's what's important. Bernays didn't advertise cigarettes. He advertised identity. He sold the idea that what you consume defines who you are, that buying a product is an act of self-creation, that you're not purchasing tobacco, you're purchasing freedom. And once you internalize that logic, you're trapped forever. Because who you are is never fixed. You can always become better. And becoming better requires buying. Bernays called this the engineering of consent. Most people would call it propaganda, but that word makes boardrooms nervous, so we use gentler language, marketing, branding, lifestyle curation. Strip away the euphemisms and you're left with the same thing: systematic manipulation of human psychology for profit. And it's everywhere now, woven into the fabric of how we think. You don't buy a car for transportation anymore. You buy it to announce your values, your status, your identity. You don't buy clothes to stay warm. You buy them to signal tribe membership, to communicate that you're current, relevant, aware. Every purchase is a performance. Every product is a costume piece in the theater of self-presentation. This brings us to 2007, San Francisco, Moscone Center. Steve Jobs takes the stage in his uniform of black turtleneck and jeans. He's holding something. The audience doesn't know what yet, and he says three things: an iPod, a phone, an internet communicator. Then he repeats it, building anticipation. And then, these are not three separate devices. This is one device, and we are calling it iPhone. The crowd loses its mind, but here's what nobody talks about. The iPhone wasn't revolutionary because of what it did. It was revolutionary because of what it made everything else feel like: obsolete, ancient, embarrassing. Within 6 months, carrying a flip phone felt like showing up to a gunfight with a bow and arrow. The iPhone didn't just create a new category. It retroactively destroyed the old one, and everyone holding a Nokia or a Motorola suddenly felt like they were living in the past. Apple understood what they had: not just a product, a religion, complete with annual pilgrimages. Every September, the faithful gather. The leaks start months before. The speculation, the rumors, the breathless coverage of every tiny detail. By launch day, you've been marinating in anticipation so thoroughly that buying feels inevitable, not optional, necessary, like breathing. And the changes, sometimes significant, often trivial: a better camera, a faster processor, a new color. But the marketing, the presentation, the orchestrated spectacle makes every release feel like the future is leaving you behind if you don't participate. The phone in your pocket, the one that sent messages perfectly yesterday, suddenly feels slow, heavy, outdated. Not because it changed, because your perception changed. Now here's where it gets dark. In 2017, users started noticing something. Old iPhones were slowing down, not gradually, dramatically. After software updates, Reddit threads filled with complaints, tech forums buzzed with theories. Apple denied everything, said users were imagining it, until a developer proved it, actually found the code. Demonstrated that Apple was deliberately throttling processor speeds in older phones. Apple's response when caught? They admitted it, said it was to preserve battery life, to prevent unexpected shutdowns. Maybe that's true. Maybe their intentions were noble. But the effect was undeniable. Your phone that worked fine last week now crawls. Apps take forever to open. The battery dies in hours. And suddenly, That new iPhone doesn't seem like a luxury. It seems like a necessity. You're not being wasteful. You're being practical. The old phone is broken. Except it's not broken. It's been sabotaged. Apple settled a lawsuit over this. Paid out $500 million. $500 million. But do the math. How many millions of people upgraded early because their phone felt slow? How many devices were sold because of that throttling? The settlement was a rounding error, a cost of doing business, and every tech company on earth watched and learned. Samsung got caught doing the same thing. Google too. Microsoft. They all realize the same truth. You don't need to wait for hardware to fail naturally. You can obsolete products through software, push an update that makes things slower, add features that only work on new devices, change file formats so old hardware can't keep up. And the beautiful part? You can claim you're helping, adding security, improving features. The user never knows they're being manipulated. This is the Upgrade Treadmill in its final form. Not mechanical failure, software neutering, products that are remotely crippled, functionality revoked through code pushed silently while you sleep. You used to own your devices. Now you license them. You paid full price, but the manufacturer maintains control. They decide when it stops working, when support ends, when your $1,000 purchase becomes junk. Look at what happened to Sonos speakers. Premium wireless audio, $300 per speaker. In 2020, Sonos announced that older speakers would stop receiving updates unless you bought new ones. They offered a trade-in program. But here's what trade-in meant. A Sonos employee watched you pour acid into your old speaker, physically destroy it while it still worked perfectly, not because it was broken, because Sonos wanted you to buy new ones. Or smart home devices. A company called Insteon made connected light switches. People spent thousands building whole home systems. In 2022, Insteon shut down overnight. No warning. Just disappeared. And every switch stopped working. Thousands of homes with expensive light switches that could only be controlled manually. The hardware was fine. The servers were gone. And with them, the functionality you paid for. This is theft. Legalized, normalized, celebrated as innovation. You buy a product, it works, then the company decides remotely that it doesn't anymore, and you have no recourse, no repair option, no alternative. You just buy the new one. And we accept this. We've been trained to accept this. The fashion industry has industrialized this extraction. Fast fashion brands release new collections every 2 weeks. Not seasons, weeks. They've convinced millions that clothes from last month are already irrelevant, that wearing last season's cuts is social failure, so people buy and discard and buy again. Closets bursting with clothes that still have tags. Landfills overflowing with garments worn twice. All because an arbitrary cycle demands perpetual consumption. The costs are staggering. Americans throw away 415,000 phones every single day. 415,000. That's over 150 million phones per year, most of them functional. They end up in landfills, leaching toxins, or shipped to Agbog Bloshi in Ghana, where children burn circuit boards for copper, breathing in lead and mercury, getting cancer in their 20s, because someone in California needed to feel current for another 12 months. We're strip mining the Congo for cobalt. Children as young as 7 working in pits. Draining aquifers in Taiwan for semiconductor production. Filling the ocean with microplastics from synthetic fabrics. Pumping carbon into the atmosphere to manufacture devices that replace devices that work. All to feed a cycle that exists purely to generate profit. Not utility, not improvement, profit. But even the environmental catastrophe isn't the worst cost. The psychological cost is worse, because the treadmill doesn't make us happy. Studies show that frequent upgraders report lower life satisfaction than people who don't. The hedonic treadmill means that new phone gives you maybe a week of elevated mood. Then it's just your phone. The novelty evaporates. The excitement fades. You return to baseline. Except now you're poorer, and you've participated in planetary destruction, and you're already thinking about the next upgrade. The system runs on manufactured anxiety, fear of falling behind, of being judged, of having your worth measured by the age of your possessions. And that fear is justified because we've built a society where showing up with an old phone suggests you can't afford better, where driving an old car signals failure, where wearing old clothes marks you as poor or irrelevant or both. We've constructed an entire economic system on the foundation of perpetual dissatisfaction, because satisfied people don't consume. Content people don't upgrade. People who feel they have enough are useless to an economy that demands infinite growth. So we can't be allowed to feel satisfied, can't be allowed to feel content, can't be allowed to believe we have enough. The treadmill only works if we keep running, and we keep running because we've been taught that stopping means losing, that contentment means settling, that good enough means giving up. We've been conditioned so thoroughly that we police ourselves now. You see someone with an old phone and you feel pity. You see someone with a new phone and you feel inadequacy. These aren't thoughts. They're reflexes, branded into your nervous system through decades of psychological manipulation. So how do you escape? How do you step off a treadmill that's everywhere, that's internalized, that's enforced by social pressure and engineered into the products themselves? You do something radical. You decide that enough is enough, not as a slogan, as a practice, as a daily rebellion against a machine that profits from your dissatisfaction. You look at your 3-year-old phone and declare it sufficient. You drive your old car with dignity. You wear clothes until they actually wear out, not until the calendar decides they're irrelevant. You repair instead of replace. You maintain instead of discard. And here's the secret they don't want you to know. Contentment is contagious. When someone sees you unbothered by having older things, it gives them permission to feel the same. It cracks the illusion. It reveals that the emperor has no clothes, that the upgrade treadmill only has power if we all agree to run. The system calls this deprivation, calls it settling, calls it falling behind. But people who've stepped off know the truth. It's liberation. Freedom from a cycle designed to drain your money and your peace. Freedom from comparing, from coveting, from the exhausting performance of staying current. You already have enough. The phone in your pocket, the car you drive, the clothes you own, they're enough. You're not falling behind. You're standing still on solid ground while everyone else runs themselves breathless on a machine that goes nowhere. The treadmill will keep spinning. New models will launch. New features will be announced. The machine doesn't stop, but you can. Anytime. And when you do, you'll discover the view is better from here.